I was halfway through my morning coffee when my phone buzzed. A quick glance at the screen and my heart skipped a beat, not from panic, but from the kind of adrenaline surge you get when something you've anticipated for weeks finally happens. Movement detected. UTV tracker active. You ever have one of those moments where time slows down and you just know it's go time? Yeah, that was me. See, this wasn't just any UTV. This was a $122,000 custom-built off-road utility vehicle that I'd busted my ass for. My pride and joy. The one I kept parked in my driveway because my garage was overflowing with tools and half-finished projects I didn't want the HOA sniffing around. Not that I owed anyone an explanation, but I knew this day would come. I had prepped for it. And now? It was finally here. Because that UTV? It wasn't abandoned. No matter what Debbie, our charming HOA president, liked to pretend. And it definitely wasn't hers to take. But that didn't stop her from rolling up, parking her powder blue hybrid in front of my driveway, and dragging my UTV into her garage like she just scored a killer deal at an estate sale. And let me tell you, this wasn't some drunken mistake or misguided favor. No, this was deliberate. You might be wondering how someone could be that brazen. But then again, you probably haven't met Debbie. She ran our neighborhood HOA like a tyrant with a clipboard. A power-tripping former substitute teacher with a flair for passive-aggressive Facebook posts and a vendetta against anything remotely fun. So when she decided my UTV was an eyesore, she didn't file a complaint or send a letter. She just took it. What she didn't know was that I had been planning for this. I'd installed a top-tier GPS tracker and alarm system the day I brought the UTV home. Not just to protect my investment, but because I knew someone like her would try something exactly like this. The app pinged again. The UTV was less than 2 blocks away. I didn't even bother putting down my coffee mug. I just walked outside, got into my truck, and followed the signal straight to Debbie's house. And sure enough, there it was, me UT sitting halfway inside her garage. The audacity was staggering. But I didn't knock. I didn't shout. I didn't even step foot on her property. Instead, I waited. Because the second she moved it, the second she powered it on, the built-in security system had already triggered an automatic alert to the local police. I parked across the street and watched. Debbie had no idea I was watching. She was inside, probably congratulating herself on a successful rescue mission, convinced she'd just cleaned up the neighborhood. My phone buzzed again. Police alert system triggered. That was the moment. The point of no return. I settled into my seat, a grin spreading across my face. Debbie was about to learn what happens when you mistake calculated calm for complacency. It didn't take long. Within minutes, I heard the wail of sirens echoing through the neighborhood, getting louder, closer. I could barely contain my anticipation. This wasn't just justice. This was justice served with flair. When the police cruiser pulled up in front of her house, I casually stepped out of my truck and leaned against the hood, arms crossed, just in time to see the show begin. The officer knocked. Debbie answered. Through the front window, I watched the conversation unfold. At first, she was confused, then defensive, then outright indignant. She didn't realize they already had the data. The tracker was broadcasting live down to the second. And the cop? He was holding it in his hand. That was the cherry on top. Debbie's expression morphed from smug to horrified in real time. I could practically hear her gears grinding as she tried to spin a new narrative on the fly. She gestured wildly, probably saying something about community standards and abandoned property. But the officer wasn't buying it. I figured that was my cue. I strolled across the street, hands in my pockets like I was out for a Sunday walk. "Everything all right, Debbie?" I called, my tone just dripping with faux concern. She turned and froze like a deer in headlights. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. "Oh, I see you're getting a little help from the local authorities," I said with a grin. The officer gave me a nod. "You the owner of the UTV?" "Yes, sir. And I've got the registration and tracker info right here." Debbie's mouth moved again, still trying to spin her tale. Something about thinking it was left unattended. "Debbie," I said slowly, "did you honestly believe someone just forgets a vehicle worth more than some houses in this neighborhood? You took it. You moved it. You hid it." The officer turned back to her. "You didn't report it as found. You didn't contact the owner. And the tracker confirms it was taken from his property." At this point, Debbie looked like she might combust. "But it was a violation," she shouted. He left it out for days. That doesn't make it yours, I replied flatly. The officer took down her information, told me they'd be filing a report, and advised me to document everything like I hadn't been doing exactly that for months. As they wrapped up, Debbie stood on her porch, seething, her face bright red, her arms shaking at her sides. But I knew this wasn't over. Debbie wasn't the kind of person who accepted defeat. She was the kind who doubled down, who lashed out. The kind of person who, when caught red-handed, decided to make herself the victim. And sure enough, the next morning, I woke up to screenshots from our neighborhood's private HOA Facebook group. Debbie had posted a 600-word tirade accusing me of harassment, theft, emotional trauma, you name it. She claimed I had manipulated the police, that I was unstable, dangerous, unfit to live in a community environment. It was unhinged, but also kind of hilarious. Because for someone who preached about order and respect, she sure didn't mind bending the rules when it suited her. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Instead, I made a call to an old buddy of mine, Detective Marcus Vaughn. We weren't especially close, but we'd crossed paths enough over the years to trust each other. I need a favor, I told him. Nothing major, just eyes open, in case things get weird. He didn't ask too many questions. Just said, got it. And thank God for that, because over the next week, Debbie kicked it into high gear. She started filing HOA complaints against netizens of them. Said my trash bins were visible for 5 minutes too long, that my grass was a half-inch too tall, that my porch light was unreasonably bright. It would have been laughable if she hadn't rallied half the HOA board behind her. But what Debbie didn't know was that I had receipts. Not just for the tracker and the police report, but for everything. Emails, messages, even footage from the time she illegally tapped into my private well to water her precious rose bushes. Yeah, she did that too. And I had the water bill to prove it. The next HOA meeting was packed. You could feel the tension in the air. Debbie stood at the front, smug as ever, calling for a vote to censure me, claiming I was disruptive to the peace and aesthetic of the community. I let her go on for 5 solid minutes before standing up and walking calmly to the front. I'd like to respond to that, I said, placing a thick folder on the table. Inside were copies of the GPS logs, the police report, and screenshots of every insane Facebook post she'd made. But the real kicker? The well documents, photos, water usage spikes, and a forged letter she'd submitted to make it look like I'd given her permission. Debbie, I said, my voice steady, you didn't just take my UTV. You stole water from my property. You faked documents. You abused your position, and you tried to ruin my reputation to cover it all up. The room went silent. Even her usual allies were shifting in their seats. Tom, one of the more level-headed board members, cleared his throat. Is this true? He asked her directly. Debbie stammered, fumbled, tried to change the subject. It was a misunderstanding, she finally said. I didn't realize. Stop, I cut in. You knew. You just thought no one would call you out. And right then, the tide turned. Tom stood. I think it's time we reconsidered Debbie's role in this community. Hands went up, one by one. Unanimous. Effective immediately, Debbie was removed as president of the HOA. She protested, cried, threatened lawsuits, but no one was listening. And as she was escorted out, shoulders slumped, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. A few weeks later, I got an official letter from the new HOA president. An apology along with a promise to revise the rules and prevent future abuse of power. Word got around that Debbie tried to start her own HOA in a neighboring community, but it fizzled. Her reputation preceded her. No one wanted to follow a dictator. As for me, I still park my UTV in the driveway every day, right in plain sight, because sometimes the best revenge is simply living your life on your own terms, knowing you outsmarted the petty tyrants of the world. And if a certain ghostly blue hybrid ever drives by a little too slow, I just smile, sip my coffee, and wait. After all, the tracker's still active.